win or fail. It was like, it's just time to try. And so that's how I ended up in poetry.
Your writings, it gives a sense of timelessness.
And one of the stories I got, I'll share very quickly, was this woman who was going through a divorce.
I'm happy to be asking the question no one has asked you before.
I say yes to things that I think are interesting and beautiful.
Those particular lines have kind of had to be like a roadmap for me and something to hold on to.
But it felt like a spiritual instruction.
Hello there, and welcome to the All African Women Poetry Festival podcast. My name is Emma Ofosua, and I am so happy to be having today's conversation with the amazing, the inspiring Titilope Sonuga, Canadian-based Nigerian artist. Happy to have you. How are you feeling? How are you doing?
I'm good. Happy to be here. Thank you for having me.
Awesome. So we're going to jump right into the conversation with Titi. I think this is me fangirling right now.
Oh no.
This is me fangirling right now because, again, like most artists, some of you have had your names precede you, and so most of us got to hear of the person before we got to have some in-person contact, and it's quite the honor to see that you do what you do so consistently well, that your name travels far beyond your close spaces. And so thank you again for gracing the stage.
Thank you.
So we're going to have this brief conversation.
Sure.
We want to introduce you as a person, and then you as an artist, and then you as a performer to our audience today, because most people get to know you as the performer.
They do.
And they know your works, they know your albums, but very few get to know you as a person.
That is true.
So when you're not writing poetry, and when you're not busy mothering, and when you're not doing all the things that you're known to be doing, how do you lounge? What are you drinking? What are you snacking on? Just take us on that very personal, up close and personal level with you.
I can safely say nobody has ever asked me that question
Okay.
before. And because mothering is such a big part, once you remove that, I'm like, okay, what am I doing?
Okay, what else?
So I'm a big lover of yoga, hot yoga at the moment, and so I usually do my rounds in the morning, drop off my kids, and I go straight to a yoga studio where I have an hour of blissful me time. I get to think and not think and empty my mind and just be inside my body again. And I think after having 2 children, that process is ongoing. What am I eating? I love popcorn. You can find me on any given day eating all kinds of popcorn.
Oh, cool.
What am I drinking? These days I'm trying to drink a lot more water. But if I weren't, I'm a Ribena girl. I like a little Ribena with ice.
Okay.
But I mean, I try to steal moments as often as I can. But the most consistent thing that I'm doing is that 1 hour a day when I'm not working, when my kids are not with me, where I'm just on a yoga mat, and that's it.
I'm happy to be asking the question no one has asked you before, because again, they get to come here for all that juice if they want to know you personally. But your work as a writer spans across multiple disciplines, or the experiences from which you write from spans a range of disciplines, and you have moved between engineering, through writing, through all the facets that there is. How would you say that the journey has impacted your current state of writing, and how has navigating the various phases? When did you know it was okay to move? How has that journey really evolved and been for you?
I mean, I started off in engineering, and I was there for 5 years doing things I had no business doing, building roads and bridges, which I think I still consider to be a creative art. You're still kind of thinking through a problem. You're trying to, metaphorically and physically build bridges between people, which is what I think I do in my work now. So now in retrospect, I can see the through line. But I was in engineering for a very long time, and I knew that it was time to leave because, and every time I say this, I know I sound very woo-woo, but it felt like a spiritual instruction. And that spiritual instruction was reinforced by the way I became increasingly unhappy in my life. I couldn't figure out why I was doing what I was doing, and I just knew it was time. Like, win or fail, it was like, it's just time to try. And so that's how I ended up in poetry, which, I mean, when you think about it, it's like, how did you plan to make a life out of being a poet? I had no plan. I was delulu, and I chased that delulu down. I think I quickly realized in poetry that I couldn't just be a poet who was standing on a microphone doing poems. I couldn't sustain the life that I imagined for myself with that, because as we know, artists don't necessarily always have the financial resources that they need. And so I started thinking through, where else is the love? Like, where else do my passions lead me? And I gave myself permission to say yes to those things. I arrived in Nigeria. Within a couple months, I was acting on a television series, simply because I just said yes. I'd never acted before. I had no training. And it was just like I was in this season of just saying yes to things and trying them. And that's kind of been the model for how I've built my career. It's like, if there's a story to be told, if I'm excited about it, even if I'm a little bit terrified, I say yes, and then I figure out how to make it work. And I haven't maybe necessarily deliberately thought I want to do all these things, but as long as I'm following the flow of where the joy is and something that challenges me, then the career has kind of built itself in that way, because I say yes to things that I think are interesting and beautiful. And it doesn't matter what it is. Like I was telling someone recently, I want to be on the back of a cereal box. I want to be on a bar of deodorant. Like, wherever you find text and writing and storytelling, hair products for Black women, I want to be there. So I say yes to things that I think are interesting. Yeah.
And that is interesting in and of itself, because again, who is thinking about being on a cereal box writing poetry or with you? Again, I think I do see it too. Pretty much, there's nothing broken here. On a whole grain.
Oh, okay, all right.
Are we franchising this already or something?
Maybe we should hurry up.
No, but that is interesting, and it's fascinating to get a walkthrough on how you process through some of these things. I want to backtrack a bit to 2011.
Okay. I'm like, what happened in 2011? What happened? Where was I?
Yeah, that was when you had the Canadian Awards of Young Writers with the Maya Angelou project bid. How did that shape the trajectory of your writing career? Did that have any, it must have been huge back then. What was that experience like, and did it significantly shape your journey in writing?
So I'm my 30+ brain is booting. I remember two things. I won the Emerging Writers Award for the Canadian Authors Association for my first collection, which was self-published, which in literary terms is like you have leprosy. Like it's this thing where within the industry, it's like self-publishing is seen as this stepchild. At the time, I had no idea how things are supposed to be done. So I'm like, I have a book. I want to publish this book. I print the book. I sell the book hand to hand, and that book sold thousands of copies hand to hand just out of my trunk. So no regrets. I missed that girl who did whatever she wanted to do. And then the Maya Angelou contest came. I can't remember which one came first, but it was kind of in the same period. And it was just like submit a poem, and whoever wins gets. She was coming to the city I was in to give a talk. You met her? I did. I'm getting there.
I'm jealous.
She was there to give a talk, and so leading up to her arrival, part of the promo plan was, get young poets in the city to write, and it'll be judged by, a jury of literary people, and they picked, and it's a blind jury, so they don't know your name. I had no name then, so it didn't even matter. So they just picked the poem out of wherever it was. And then I won. And it's funny because the deadline was at midnight. I submitted at like 11:50 or something, as I'm prone to do. This is one of my toxic traits. And won. And so what I got in winning was to meet her before she went on stage to perform her show. And we met backstage, took pictures. I took her a copy of my book, my self-published book that I had signed. Who did I think I was? I don't know.
Are we framing that for?
I was. I gave it to her, and I remember sitting there chatting with her for a little while, and she was like, "Oh, you smile a lot. I don't trust people that don't smile," which I just thought was just so sweet. Like, she doesn't trust people that don't laugh or smile.
Right.
And then she went on stage, and so after meeting her backstage, I sat in the audience and watched her. And this was a woman who was well into her twilight years, sitting on a chair on stage, I think even then with an oxygen tank. And she was at the Winsphere Center, which in Edmonton is one of the biggest kind of concert halls, packed seats. And she held us like in her grasp for over an hour, just sharing stories, like no frills, no band, no nothing, just sharing stories and poetry. And in very quiet ways, I saw that and I knew, like, that's my North Star. I want to love this thing I'm doing so much so that when I'm this age, like, it doesn't feel like work, and I'm still happy to be here telling these stories. I just thought, and that's a woman who's done, again, this career of like having done all sorts of things beyond just, putting pen to paper. So yeah, it did change my life.
And it did change your life, as is evident today, because then you went on from there to establish Edmonton Rouge Poetry, and you are also named Edmonton's 9th Poet Laureate. And so I think you kind of drew very close to your North Star, because again, it was the guiding light, and every step that had been paved on that path, you are gradually walking that. So now we can say you have a name. Then you didn't, but now the name Titilope is weighty.
It's rising small.
It is weighty. Let's not play modest about it, because it's a big deal. And we're grateful. We're grateful that you keep walking that path. But talk us through that journey of establishing Rouge Poetry in Edmonton, even being named Edmonton's 9th Poet Laureate, and what that has meant to today.
Right. So Rouge Poetry came at a time in my work where, I was still an engineer, but I was kind of dabbling with performance poetry specifically. And I had come up through the slam scene, and I liked the energy and the electricity of that. But the city I lived in had very few offerings for that. It was a lot of kind of cafes and coffee shops and libraries, really gentle readings, where when I came in there with these memorized poems, I just felt like an odd, fish out of water. I was really into, this was for me, the Def Poetry Jam era, and I was like, oh, I can make a night like that where it'll be really cool on a Friday night and people will get dressed up to come and just listen to poetry. They did not. So the first few weeks was just me begging my friends and family, please come to this open. I would read every poem I'd ever written in my life. I would read on the stage, because we had no poets, we had no audience, we had no nothing, until I started to collaborate with people in my community. So I founded the Breath and Poetry Collective after starting the night, which is just a group of the people who came regularly enough that I knew that they were interested. And through the collective, we started kind of reach in all of our networks, and then the night started getting full. It ran for a decade, and on some nights we would have to turn people away at the door. People were sitting on the floor at a restaurant downtown. It was a moment in time. Being the Poet Laureate of the city is a once-in-a-lifetime honor. You get 2 years to do the best you possibly can. And in that time, my job was to bring poetry to the people and make them feel like they were part of the art scene in our city, even if they were not people who had their heads buried in books. And so it meant, doing unconventional things and being in all kinds of spaces in schools and working with local businesses and just making the stories of Edmontonians feel like something that was uniquely their own. It's short, but it's also long. It's 2 years, and before you know, you blink and it's gone. But my main project, you have to have one main project, was something called Tenderness YEG, Tenderness Edmonton, where I invited people in the city to submit. It was post-COVID, 2021, to submit stories of tenderness to me, where in the midst of the pandemic, somebody had reached out. And one of the stories I got, I'll share very quickly, was this woman who was going through a divorce, and she had this orange plant in her garden that hadn't grown, it was dead. And so she had this horrible divorce that she was experiencing, and when she finalized the divorce, she remembers kind of looking up and seeing that the plant was fruiting and the smell of citrus was moving through her house, and she just thought, what a tender mercy to imagine that something that you thought was dead still had life in it. So these are the kind of stories that people were sending in, and I was kind of collecting them on a website, and it's a project that I think should live beyond my tenure, but yeah, that's one of the things that I did. That was really beautiful.
That is beautiful and profound. It is
I thought
beautiful
so.
and profound. Yeah. Your writings, though, your poetry suggests it gives a sense of timelessness to the themes of courage, as though they transcend generations. And I kind of want you to speak to how you lean into those themes personally, and how you see that resonating with the audiences that you get to interact with.
You ask such good questions.
Thank you so much.
You really do.
Yeah.
The theme of courage, I think we all come from a lineage of something, right? So I like to imagine, and there's a book, a devotional I've been working through that talks about how you're living in the prayers that your ancestors had, like your grandfather, who got on his knees and prayed and prayed and prayed, you get to live that out in ways that he will never see. And so I don't think I'm courageous on my own. I think that that knowing comes from somewhere deeper, and in each generation we get to make a small inch forward. So I imagine my grandmother in her era took one small inch forward, and my mother did, so that I can, so my daughter can, and right in that way it transcends and flows through generations of people, where you get to kind of collect the baton from the generation before you to forge ahead in whatever way feels courageous to you. Because for some people, a courageous decision does not have to be this massive thing. It could be small changes, small ways you push back against the ways that the world is trying to smother you. One of the central themes of my work, or like my aim, if I had one, is to make people feel less alone. And I think the human experience, even if you have children or husbands or partners or whatever, it's still, when you put your head down at night, it's just you and what's inside your head. And so I'm hopeful through my work that people feel seen and heard in ways that makes them know that we are all a part of something together. And I want them to feel like they can be courageous about the ways that they live their lives. So I would say it is intentional in many ways. And so I'm glad that you see that, I guess.
No, I do see that, and I think that hope is achieved. Because personally, I think your piece, I've been living, I think 2 weeks leading to this edition of the festival, I've literally been sitting with your piece, The Woman, and so you talk about you are a woman becoming, you were born for this sort of heavy lifting. There's those particular lines have kind of had to be like a roadmap for me and something to hold on to, and so I think it really does well to resonate. But also your poems Becoming and Sanctuary speaks about themes that resonates or talks about the resilience of womanhood, and you do that so well in how you communicate the messages embedded in these two pieces. How has this conversation of gender, of women owning their place and power, is that a deliberate attempt to make that the message, or is that pretty much a consequence of being one yourself?
Ooh. And people always ask me how you're always writing about women, because you know, the album I have coming out is called Sis. Again, it's about the celebration of sisterhood. It seems like I'm always like, that's sort of where my posture is turned toward. And yes, it's probably because I am a woman, and so I'm preoccupied with the things that concern me. But also because I don't know a more magical being than one that like continues to give life, you know, like I just think there's endless material with women. There's endless places to go in the ways that we move through the world. I'm fascinated by that. And so I follow my curiosity, right? And it doesn't mean that the work does not have access points for other people, but I definitely want the people that I'm talking to know that I'm talking to them. So I make that clear. And when I have another curiosity, it'll start to bubble up in my work. But I speak to women because I am a woman, and I write things that I wish to hear myself. Oftentimes these poems I'm writing, Becoming, the poem you mentioned, I wrote, it was commissioned for the role that I was on TV. Eki, the character, was going through some diabolical things and needed a poem. So I wrote it for her then, but you know, a few months later, I was like, I am a woman becoming, because I needed it too. And so sometimes I'm writing these things as like a prophetic word for in front, or something I'm pulling from the past. They're for me as much as they are for everyone else. And I guess writing is in many ways first a selfish endeavor. You're kind of like trying to unpack something inside of you, and then you offer it to the world. And so that's why it shows up so strongly in my work.
Right. And I feel I totally agree, because again, sometimes you write and it seems you're writing for a future self. Probably at the time of writing you don't exactly get a sense of, but you walk into time and find that work is waiting is waiting for you just as a pick-me-up when you need it. And in that sense, writing becomes that thing that serves us as we use it to serve other people as well. And it's a beautiful cycle to behold. I hope I could go on and on and on and have this phenomenal conversation with you. We should definitely do this again. But in wrapping up, what theme should we be looking forward to? What works are you working on that we should be looking forward to? Where can we find your stuff? And talk us through a bit about even Sister, the album coming up. Is it out yet? Where do we find it? All that. Tell us.
So the things that I have immediately in the horizon: one, my album Sis, that is not yet out but will be before the end of the year, a celebration of sisterhood and the ways in which women carry each other, friendships that were and friendships that ended, friendships that are to be. It's kind of exploring all the messy things around being a friend to another woman. And then I was commissioned to reimagine an opera by Igor Stravinsky called The Soldier's Tale. And so I wrote my version of The Soldier's Tale that will go on stages in Toronto in October. And so rehearsals for that start as soon as I leave Accra. I'm going to that. So those two things are kind of like the main things to look out for. But I'm everywhere on the internet, Titilope, www.titilope.ca, on my Instagram, just my first name. And usually I try to, I'm not very good at it, but I try to share what's coming next. But those two things, if you're in Canada, if you're in Toronto, come see the opera. And if you're all over the world, listen for the album, which will be soon, in Jesus' name.
Amen. Since we're ending on a prayer, I guess I'm praying that I find myself in Canada in October to experience that. But definitely congratulations on those two. They're huge, and we're backing you and supporting you. Let us know how we can help push it. But it's phenomenal what you're doing, so don't stop. Don't stop. Just keep pushing. Thank you. Thank you. Any final words? Any closing words to any young girl out there watching you and going, I want that to be my North Star too?
That the journey is a marathon. It is long, but there are many people who went before you, and I believe that you have the powers within you to achieve all of your dreams, one baby step at a time, one micro thought at a time. But also, I can't leave this couch without saying that I think what you're doing here is incredible. I've in the few days that we've been here, when you can see the magic of a thing forming. And while it is in its infancy and it's growing, I really do feel like this kind of space for women who are creating work to fellowship with each other, quite frankly, I feel like that's what it's been, is magical. And so congratulations and well done.
Thank you. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you so very much.
My pleasure.
And there you have it. It's been an amazing conversation with Titilope Sonuga. And this has been the All African Women Poetry Festival podcast. We're so happy that you stayed. Do stick and stay, like, share, comment, and engage with us down there. We're going to link every project she's working on currently in the comment section below. Tell a friend to tell a friend that there's an amazing conversation happening here they cannot miss. My name remains Emma Ofosua, and I look forward to seeing you again. Stick and stay.
Tapon, actually in Fanti, means a paddle. So when I saw the name, I was really fascinated, because it's time also to use our language and symbols to represent ourselves.